All right. Hi, Joan. How are you?
Hi, Douglas. How are you? I'm great. Thank you for having me on the show.
Well, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. So, you are an author and you've got a book called The Miracle Collectors. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. The Miracle Collectors came out a week ago,
Oh, a week
hot off the
ago.
press.
Great. How's it doing?
We understand that it's doing really well. And the most exciting thing and rewarding thing to us, actually, is reading the reviews that have been left on Amazon or Barnes and Nobles or Goodreads, and that people really seem to resonate and relate to the book, feeling that it's a book that's really important. Its message is really important, especially as we've just gone through this year of pandemic and social isolation, that finding a book that's uplifting, that has inspiring stories that really everyone can relate to has been, as people say, it's just what we need.
Well, that's great. I'm glad to hear that. I was looking at your bio and it says that after a 30-year career in medical administration and advancing innovative medical solutions, your expertise was put to the test to save the life of your son. That sounds incredible. You want to tell us that story?
It was ominous. Um, yes, I also want you to know I started my healthcare career very young. So um, basically, I had a very healthy, at the time, 13-year-old, and he was a great athlete. And through a whole series of coincidences, um, his life was really saved. And I'll tell you why. Uh, I happened to be at school the day that he had crushing chest pain and chose to follow it up, even though it subsided, an hour later or so. Followed it up with one doctor who said, oh, just chalked it up to, the workout he had done at his swim practice the day before. It just really was one of those things that as a mom sort of stuck with me and continued to follow it up. It turned out that he had an anomalous coronary artery. And what that means is that both of his coronary arteries were on the same side of his heart. One is supposed to be on the one side and one on the other side. And they only find this when people drop dead suddenly, and then they do an autopsy. And so the sort of medical innovation side was, again, schools were closed. We happened to do a trip to the East Coast because my husband and I are both in healthcare. He actually was able to get on a experimental machine at the time to look at where his coronary arteries were. And they actually said, aha, they're 2 millimeters away apart from each other. That's really close. It's the width of a nickel. We went back to try to figure out who could do this surgery to fix his heart. And what you had to do at the time was to have a cardiac catheterization before you have open heart surgery. And the cardiac catheterization said there's no way that anyone can move this artery. We're going to have to do a bypass. And when they do a bypass, that would, as we all know, bypasses last from anywhere from 10 to 15 years. And that would set up our 13-year-old for several open heart surgeries over the course of his lifetime, which was nothing any parent really wants to hear.
No.
Um, we were persistent about the whole thing and finally found a surgeon who just thought he had an idea but wasn't sure he could actually do it, given the results of the cardiac cath and given that you can't stay on the bypass machine forever. Other things start to happen. At any rate, we're in the hospital waiting room at the time of his surgery. And mind you, we're taking a very healthy child for open heart surgery. This was a very difficult decision. And we're as far away from the television, which was playing Jerry Springer, as possible. When I got about 4 hours in, I got a phone call, or come to the desk, please. So I went up to the desk, and the nurse in the operating room said, well, this is the most dangerous part of the operation. And your son's on bypass, on the bypass machine. And I said, okay, thank you very much. And then I heard my name. I hung up the phone and I heard my name being called. My maiden name is Louise. And all of a sudden, this name Louise was coming from the television. And I turned to look, and Jerry Springer was no longer on the television. But what was on the television was the Song of Bernadette, which was an Academy Award winning movie of 1943. It was my favorite movie as a child. And the Bernadette's mother's name is Louise. They were calling her. And it's a story of the healing shrine in Lourdes, France. And Bernadette was 13 at the time she found it. My son in surgery was 13. There were some parallels. And as the credits rolled, and the parents in the waiting room were so confused because no one had changed the station and they couldn't understand how this could possibly be. And I said, well, we can change it back, but this is a great movie. And and they were like, no, let's watch. So we watched the movie, and as the credits rolled, I was sort of the last person in the waiting room because their children's surgeries were much shorter than our son's. The surgeon came in and he said, I can't believe it. He said, I had exactly the right amount of 2 millimeters that I needed to move his coronary artery to where it was supposed to be. I think he's good. I think he'll never have another problem with his heart again. And that sense of peace that had come over me in the movie was truly remarkable. But it just really goes to show you that you need to sort of stay on top of things. And so my sort of miracle experience was this wonderful series of coincidences that, quite frankly, I would have never called a miracle until I was really forced to examine what had happened and all the steps that had happened by my 2 friends at the time. And one friend had a very clear miracle experience with her own daughter who had been shaken by the babysitter at 6 months and was at the time paralyzed and then blinded. She did get her mobility back, but the babysitter had basically, shaken her with the force of throwing her out a 2-story window. And we were sort of catching up on that story. We were catching up. The 3 of us had met for coffee. We were catching up on my son's story. And then our 3rd author, my co-author in this book, Katie Mahon, said, well, I have a story for you. And she proceeded to recount the story of having been lured by Ted Bundy to a hotel room or to a conference room in a hotel in San Francisco back in the 70s. And her escape by when she realized what had happened from a bellman who serendipitously showed up at the time when pure evil and Ted Bundy was basically set to pounce, if you will, and with the words that isn't a time you should be going. And they walked together to the open elevator, and she told us this story, which quite frankly made us speechless. So we had our stories that we went out and we felt sort of like we have to make sense of this. So we started investigating miracles in other cultures and religions and philosophy and science, and published a first book, and then went around the country talking about that book. And after we told our stories, people came out of the woodwork to tell us their stories. And the stories that they told us were amazing stories. They were stories of love, of forgiveness, of courage, of gratitude. And some of them they had never told anyone before. Some of them, we jogged their memory. Some of them, they said they finally felt safe to talk about something that they felt had been on this don't ask, don't tell list. And so we really felt as though we had become the story keepers, and that we needed to give voice in a way to allow these stories to be told, and also in a way to empower others to recognize the miracles in their own lives.
Okay, thank you. That
was a long answer.
Yeah, it was a long answer, and I got a few questions, but let me see here. Okay, going back to the TV set in the waiting room, was it actually on a different channel after it switched from Jerry Springer to the movie? Or was it on the same channel and that's just what was up next?
No, Jerry Springer was still on. His show was still on, because I said I actually went to turn it, and but what was really weird was, I'll be honest, I can't tell you whether the numbers had changed, because it was one of those, when you're in those waiting rooms, the TVs are way up high.
Oh yeah.
And
okay.
I couldn't see it, but no one, I almost wondered if there was something upstairs that had triggered it. But I have to tell you, at the time that I heard my name and I saw this movie come on, this incredible feeling of peace that came over me was profound. And it's profound to anyone who knows me, because I tend not to run around with a lot of feelings of peace. I tend to be fairly frantic. And so, and certainly any parent who's in an operating room, waiting room, when their child is having any kind of surgery is anything but calm or peaceful.
I've had this conversation with several other people on the show who have had similar experiences that you have had. And they call it different things. People have called it God. People have called it collective consciousness. People have called it...
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The question that always is interesting to me is the fact that there is life after death, or that there is some unique spirit within all living things that transcends the body, that transcends this particular life. It really hasn't been proven widespread on one hand. On the other hand, the majority of the people on earth believe in some sort of a religion which does believe in that. All of them do, in different variations. Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, okay, they all believe in it, one form or another. My question is always, imagine if we proved it, that there was indeed life after death, whatever your version of it is, and the government knew that this was proven. Do you actually think that they would release that information to the world? I would guess no, because that would cause such an incredible state of chaos and panic amongst people. Because once the fear of death is removed from our life, how do you control people? You can't. Well, I'm not afraid to die. Dying is great, so I'm just going to go out and shoot people, rob a bank, do whatever I want to do. And there's no repercussions at that point.
Well, the first chapter of our book is called Terminal Course. And it talks about, living as if you were going to die tomorrow. And it really, focuses on, what are the things, how do we identify the things that are really important to us? And, I don't disagree with you in that, some say that, we see the backside of the tapestry. We don't see the full tapestry, if you will. So I think the majority of people do believe that there's life after death. So I think whether the government tells us that it exists or not is, to me, immaterial. But I do believe that, for others, it would be significant. But I think that we all have to I think what's really important is that we take time to make our own decisions about some of these things. Because, and I do think that, for example, spirituality has really had a resurgence. And I think that that's a terrific, part of humankind, because I think that if we ignore our spiritual side, we really are like this incomplete puzzle. We certainly are our social selves, our emotional selves, our physical bodies, but we do have, Teilhard de Chardin says, we're spiritual beings having a human experience as opposed to human beings having a spiritual one. So it's an interesting sort of jump shift. And I think that, there's certainly, we don't delve into a lot of, the people with near-death experiences and those kinds of things. But I think that what we do is try to empower people to look at their lives in a new way and maybe find this new meaning, find additional connection with others, and give their life, that gives their life new meaning. And I think that's really an important piece of being human.
Well, I agree.
Regardless of what happens once we're gone.
Well, I agree. And also, if aside from the government paranoia of control of society, once people realize that there is, in fact, something beyond this life, it tends to make people re-evaluate their priorities in this world. And when you look at very spiritual people who genuinely have true faith, they're happy. Even if their circumstances are incredibly poor, incredibly modest. The example I like to use is we have the rich woman living in Beverly Hills whose life is a misery because her pool water turned green this morning. And then,
Yes.
and then you have those children that you see playing in garbage dumps in India, and they are just the happiest children you've ever seen in your life. And you compare those two, where would you rather be, spiritually speaking?
Well, I think you're right. I think, there's actually an app that you can that reminds you 5 times a day that we're going to die, because it came out shortly after an article was written about the happiest people in the world, and they're in Bhutan, and they don't have a lot, but they appreciate, what is there, and that's the beauty. So in terms of, our first section is really all about becoming aware. It's noticing the people and things around you. It's, appreciating the sunset or the sunrise. It's, appreciating right now in so many parts of the country, the crocuses are beginning to come up. The springtime, comes forth. It is, a baby's laugh. It's really simple things. And, we believe that miracles, however you define them, because we also believe that, miracles, the definition, if you will, is a very personal one, are empowering, and, kind of make us feel that that we're not alone, that we're connected to something maybe larger than ourselves, and
Right.
that will survive after, we're gone. The sun will come up tomorrow, right?
We can only hope.
Yes,
We have
exactly.
we have no proof that it will, though. That's the interesting thing. Everybody has the faith that the sun will rise tomorrow morning, but there's no actual proof that it will. Joan, we do have to wrap this up. We have run out of time. Do you have a website that you want to give out?
We do. We have our website is www.themiraclecollectors.com. You can purchase the book from the website. You can sign up for our blog on the website. You can share a miracle story, which we'd love to hear, on the website. And please visit us at www.themiraclecollectors.com.
Thanks so much for coming on the show and sharing your story. How old is your son now?
My son is 35 now. He is an emergency physician in Chicago,
Wonderful.
and he is on the front lines of COVID, and I couldn't be more proud.
And he's
And I
doing
think that
great, and he's in good shape, and
he's in great shape. And, we talk about miracles having a ripple effect.